You're tuned in to Ask the Master Auto Technician. Car questions? Get answers right now. Call 850-763-0555.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed. Beep, 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 yeah!
All right, good morning, everybody. This is James Morris. It's Tuesday morning, bright and early, so good morning, Panama City. So it's time to get up, get ready. You're not going to school unless you're going to summer school, but it's time to get ready to go to work. For a lot of people that have that job, that 8 to 5 job out there, or 7 to 4, or whatever it may be. I just know that we work very, very hard for our money out there, and it seems like I have people all the time talk about, James, it just no matter how hard I work, it seems like I get farther and farther behind. And I said, well, it could be the fact that you have a tax that you're not aware of. And they go, what are you talking about? I said, you have something called inflation. That is a hidden tax that you don't know about. They say it's around 0 to 2% a year, but in reality, it's probably a lot higher, probably closer to 10% a year. If you start doing the addition and see what it's been in the last 10 years, what you could buy for $20 10 years ago and what you can buy for $20 today, you'll see that hidden tax that you don't know anything about. And it's right there. And speaking of hidden taxes, we're trying to make things a little bit more transparent. I got Larry Walters from the Fairtax organization. Larry, we're talking about that hidden tax of inflation out there. How would the Fairtax is a consumption tax where when you buy something you pay a tax on it, so you can pick or choose if you want to buy something or not. If you don't want to buy anything, you don't pay any tax, you can save the money. But how would that help inflation? Is there any figures or anyone ever talked about how that could help solve inflation?
I can't say that I've seen anything on that, James.
Okay. I was just curious about that because we have a lot of, they tell us it's only 2% inflation a year. Do you really think that's all we have in your mind?
No, it's a lot more than that.
Yes.
But the reason we don't see it in the actual prices of what we purchase, well, actually, there's two reasons. One is that we're getting less for the dollar. The containers that we purchase, instead of being a 1-pint container, it's 9/10 of a pint.
Yes.
Or something else of that nature, some other reduction along those lines. Look at your butter.
Coffee's the same thing. You don't buy a full, 2 pound or 3 pound?
A full pound or 2 pounds, right.
Yeah, it's always a little less. But that's what's happening. We don't, we always talk about we don't like taxes. We don't like taxes, but yet we pay, if I'm not mistaken, Larry, please correct me, approximately the average person pays between, 22 to 26%, somewhere in that general area in federal
Correct.
taxes. And then go ahead.
And if you add other taxes, we're paying even more than that. State taxes of one type or another.
If you add all the other taxes we have in here, where it's property tax, ad valorem tax, whatever your taxes, gas tax, all these other taxes, if I'm not mistaken, it's darn close to 50% of what we're taking home.
That's right.
And that a lot of people say, James, I just find that so hard to believe. Well, I found it hard to believe either until I start figuring out how much I actually take and how much I actually have to spend. And I go, well, dadgum, it's almost half of what I make goes towards some form of taxation. And what you're submitting is out there, which is also the Libertarian candidate for President, Gary Johnson, supports a fair tax, whereas we get rid of the Internal Revenue Service, and at the same time get it where we have a consumption tax where we don't have every month or every week money taken out of our paycheck. We get our entire paycheck, and then we can pick and choose, do we want to buy anything or do we not want to buy anything? Of course, most people have to buy things to stay alive, but this would make sure that everyone has skin in the game. Am I correct? Because right now, 47% of the people out there don't pay taxes.
No, you're absolutely right, James. And I've got to tell your listeners that you are so well versed on the features of the Fairtax. I don't know why you pay me to come on the show every morning.
Well, I call because you give a different perspective. You're actually, you do. What is the average perspective from someone that is, well, you're a little older than me, Larry. I'd say you're at least 1 or 2 years older than me. What is the average perspective when you go and talk to somebody that's in their, your age about the fair tax? Do they think it's fair, or do they think it's unfair? Do they think it's something that just won't work? What does the average person you're talking to feel like?
Okay. if I'm talking to somebody who is not a Fairtax supporter, you're talking about the guy that hasn't been made aware of the Fairtax yet.
Yes, sir.
They don't have any perspective. The best I can tell them in a quick, thumbnail sketch to try and get their attention is the Fairtax is legislation that's in the House and the Senate right now that eliminates the entire income tax system. It abolishes the code entirely, so there's no income tax code for the IRS to enforce. And for that reason, we abolish the IRS also, because we no longer need them. The Fairtax will be administered by the states, which makes it a much closer thing to us, easier for us to affect a change if they're doing something that isn't correct in our eyes. Whereas with the federal government, they don't listen to what we're saying.
Well,
I mean, it's just,
yeah, you're right. They don't listen.
And then, at that point, I say, do you think this is a good idea? And most of them say, yeah, it sounds okay.
It does
And I
sound
say,
good.
well, do you have any questions about this? And they'll say, well, if you're eliminating the income tax system and if you're not taking any money for Social Security and Medicare, am I going to lose Social Security? Am I not going to get Social Security? And of course, the answer is no, because the fair tax, which is collected at the cash register, 23 cents out of the dollar, also pays for Social Security and the Medicare taxes that you were having deducted from your paycheck, which means that everybody, including visitors to the country, some 60 million every year, and the underground economy, which hasn't been paying any taxes, and that's over $1 trillion a year, they will now be contributing to yours and my Social Security and Medicare as well as their own.
That is
and then they say, gee, that sounds pretty good.
It does.
I'll vote for it if it comes up. And I have to remind them, because they don't know what the process is for making change to tax law or any kind of law, for example, in Washington.
Right.
And I have to tell them, no, it's not something you're going to be able to vote for. It's something you're going to have to call your congressman and your U.S. senators and tell them that you support the fair tax. You think it's a very, very fair tax, and you want them to support it too. And if they want your support for their next reelection, they're going to have to be fair tax supporters.
Now, the advantage of the fair tax for Social Security is everyone's paying that 23 visitors, everybody, underground economy. That would probably be the only way I can see Social Security being able to be sustainable in the form it's in right now without making major changes to the retirement age or doing a means testing. They're talking about doing that right now, raising the Social Security age to 70 or higher, and doing a monetary means. Hey, do you have the means to need this or not? Even though you may have paid into it or not, they're looking at doing that. But if we do this right here, everybody pays. They're talking about Social Security becoming insolvent in the next 10 to 12 years, which they've been talking about that for a long time, but a lot depends on how we keep the money coming into it, because that's what it takes. It's other people's money that keeps Social Security going and going into this big pool, so to speak. And right now, there's no lockbox. All that's been robbed. There's nothing in savings, and all the money goes into the General Revenue Fund. And so it doesn't look very promising for Social Security in the future if it continues the way it's going. Is that a fair assumption of what I'm saying?
That is correct, James.
Because yes,
it is the only tax reform proposal that will provide a more sound income base for Social Security and Medicare.
And
right now, only the legitimately working people in this country contribute to the Social Security and Medicare fund.
Right.
Under the fair tax, everybody contributes when they purchase anything.
Anything that's new, nothing used. You can't buy. Fair tax doesn't apply to used cars. Doesn't apply to secondary. If you're buying a house that's used, I guess that's one of the houses that wouldn't have sales tax on it. Would be a used house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So we're getting rid of a lot of the deductions. Not deductions. The exemptions. We're getting rid of a lot of exemptions out there. I think we pay tax on everything except. Do we pay tax on medical care and things like that, or is it just all the way across the board, everything gets taxed on it?
Everything gets taxed across the board,
Okay.
except the used items that you mentioned, and the cost of the fees for education.
Okay.
Whether it be tuition, and that's from kinder care to graduate schools, or whether it's a seminar that you might attend to improve from your work to improve your income producing capability.
Is there any other countries in the world that have this implemented? Right now, we only got a couple of minutes left, but has any other countries have a fair tax? I know we have value-added tax, which is in addition to an income tax. Is a fair tax been implemented in any other country that you know of?
No, I can tell you without any hesitation that there is no other country that has a fair tax as we have proposed it.
Okay.
And quite frankly, we do not. If some other country imposes a fair tax as we have proposed it, America will be in deep poop, James, because that country will have all of the advantages of any kind of investment money coming into them. And we will have corporate inversions like you've never seen before, because companies will go to that country to have their headquarters and have all their tax collected in that particular country.
Wow.
And because there's no tax on corporations, there's no tax on business-to-business transactions, the cost of goods go down across the board.
Right.
That is a great advantage.
Wow. You're right. That would be a great advantage. And if someone does that, there'd be a giant sucking sound of businesses leaving America.
Absolutely.
Boom.
So we really have to get serious about this. The American people have to get off of their duff, get out from the in front of the television set or off of their Facebook and whatnot, and spend a few minutes a week, half an hour a week, doing something productive for the fair tax, which would be like sending a letter to your congressman and your senators, sending a letter to the Ways and Means Committee and things like that, to help them know that there's a lot of people out here that really want the fair tax, not a fair tax, 2 words, but the fair tax, 1 word. That is a registered trademark.
Fair tax.
And when people are talking about fair taxes, our politicians especially, they like to use the term in 2 words. Oh, yes, of course I would support a fair tax. I want a fair tax. Who wouldn't? But they are not saying they want the fair tax, the 1-word version of that particular phrase.
They want a fair tax, just using that word, not actually talking about a fair tax. They're talking about, it's just wordsmithing. What is it? Truth is treason in the empire of lies. People do not want to talk about what needs to be done because it actually takes away power from certain people. Usually, that like in Congress or whatever. And I see this quite often. People don't like it, and that's why I got Rob Lapham coming on here. He's running for U.S. Congress, and we're going to get him on here in a minute. But Larry, if people want to know more about it, they can go fairtax.org and find out about it. All 1 word.
That's the place to go. And if they want to learn more about how the embedded taxes really work and how they get embedded, they can join our webinar a week from Thursday. And I think I sent you a webinar announcement last week.
Right. I'm going to try to go to it this week.
They can get that information from you. I'm sure you'd be happy to email it to them. They can contact me at repeal_16 at earthlink.net.
Repeal_16 at earthlink.net.
Correct.
All right, Larry, you be good. I got to get Rob over here. We'll be back to talk to you next Tuesday, sir. Thank you so much for calling.
Good deal. Have a great day.
You too now. Bye-bye.
James Auto Center, we fix it right.